Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, I made a mistake last night, a mistake that I should have known better than to commit, but I did it anyway. I was going about my business, actually preparing to, for this program, and I turned on CNN. Now, I know what I'm getting into at CNN. I fully understand. I did it because I'm going to tell you what I did. I saw that they were talking about Artemis 2, and I thought, I've followed it a little bit yesterday, but I hadn't seen much about it, so I thought, let me see what's going on here. They had traveled yesterday farther from planet Earth than anyone has ever traveled, and so I thought I would tune that in. Well, I caught the end of the program right as it was turning over from whoever it is. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter. Erin Burnett, I believe, went from her program to Anderson Cooper 360, which I think is a very correct, accurate name for that. They spin in circles all over the place over there, just constantly spinning in circles, madness, mayhem, total delusion, total senselessness, my friends. So that's what they did. They spun in circles, and they were talking about Trump and the Iran war. And listen, friends, Anderson Cooper is not this stupid. He's not. He's intentionally weaponizing his ignorance. That's what's happening there. And I want to talk about it. And there's other things I want to get to as well, because today, 8 p.m. tonight, Eastern, Trump has given Iran an ultimatum. Now, you can say he's done this before. Will this one come and go? I don't know. But if you listen to reports, it looks like Iran thinks that Trump is pretty darn serious this time, and that they look to be preparing for a new round of strikes. Only time will tell, my friends. We'll get into this today as this and other issues, time permitting. And by the way, if you want to hear the full story, if you want to get all the links and the background information, and even read some of the things that I have to say about these issues that I don't have time to get to on this program, we got just the thing for you. It's called The Inner Circle. It's totally free. You can become a member and get a daily roundup of, what we discussed on this show, links and other information, other things, again, that we didn't have time to get to. Text TRUTH, TRUTH. Text the word TRUTH to 317-785-1030, and you will be a member. It's totally free. So that's what you can do. All right, so that's the direction we're headed. My friends, I know you care about this country. I know that you do, but you can't fight for this nation if you're not taking care of yourself. That's why I want to tell you about Solti. Solti is an all-natural, clinically proven, is this thing on? Listen to me. The clinically proven, science has spoken on this. It's a supplement that's been clinically proven to lower cholesterol safely. It's done it for a lot of people, maybe able to do the same for you as well. There's no prescriptions, there's no doctor's visits, none of that. Just 2 soft gels a day. That's all you have to do. It's not a drug, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work. I take the product, and I think you should consider taking it too. Do not let high cholesterol slow you down. If you've got a history of high cholesterol, concerns about your heart as you age, whatever the case may be, check it out. Go to Solti.com, Soltea, Solti.com. Promo code Todd is going to save you 50% on your first 3-month supply and get you free shipping to boot. Again, Solti.com, Soltea, promo code Todd. Saves you 50% on your first order, your first 3-month supply, gets you free shipping as well. The only thing, my friends, you have to lose are those high cholesterol points. Okay, so let's get into this today. I mentioned that I was watching AC. Is that what it's called? AC 360? Stupid name, by the way. But it's accurate, I think. The more I think about it, they spin all over the circles all over there. They don't land on anything. You're dizzy after watching it. You're confused and disoriented. I understand. 360 makes a ton of sense. So I turned it on last night by accident. It truly was by accident. And I watched the first few minutes of this. I watched his opening monologue where he misrepresented what was happening in Iran. I watched this. I watched him portray what's happening in Iran as though Trump doesn't know what he wants to do. I watched him talk about Trump bombing bridges and infrastructure power plants as though it's a direct attack on civilians. I watched him misrepresent. He even used sound bites. And the conclusion he drew, he played 2 or 3 sound bites. The conclusion he drew from the soundbite was not the conclusion that I certainly drew. And this is, of course, to the low information voter, this is what they watch and they listen to. They trust Anderson Cooper for reasons that are well beyond me. I don't know why. I guess because he's on CNN and they tell you CNN is the most trusted name in news. I guess. Why would anyone trust Anderson Cooper? Was Anderson Cooper right about a single thing during COVID? Was Anderson Cooper telling his viewers about how evil and wicked the Iranian regime is for killing tens of thousands of their own people? Where was Anderson Cooper? And maybe he was, because I don't watch the stupid show. I've got a lot of things better to do than watch these idiotic programs on CNN. It's propaganda. It's disinformation. It's not serious. They act like they're being real journalists. They are they're the PR firm, effectively, of the Democrat Party. They've got a midterm election coming up that they're trying to win at all costs. And listen, they are all in. They've pushed all their chips to the center of the table on this to take Trump out, to take Republicans out by, of course, associating them with Trump and, of course, misrepresenting Trump, maligning him, lying about him. Were they right, by the way, on the Georgia election or what happened in our 2020 election? Did they even ask a single question? If someone asked a single question about, I don't know, something like 2,000 mules, for example, they lost their minds. They wouldn't even address it. They would say, you're trying to undermine our elections. We won't even come close to talking about that. That's how they deal with these things, my friends. They're not serious. It's amateur hour over there. These people are, deceitful. Listen, I hate to say it. They're if you're intentionally deceitful to the point where we now have bullets that have been flying at the president of the United States, to the point where we now are in this war that could erupt into something much, much greater, which, by the way, much greater means Iran has a nuclear weapon. They misrepresent Israel. They tell us how wonderful the Palestinian leadership is and all this stuff. It's constant misinformation over there. Or it's at least, at bare minimum, it's at least one-sided. It's not designed to give the viewer accurate information to make his or her own decision, draw his or her own conclusion. That's not it at all. What this is a focused effort to create an outcome that they want. And candidly, they've accomplished this with their viewers. Fortunately, they don't have too many viewers. Viewers are dropping like flies because a lot of people have caught on to this game. The jig is up, as they say, for a lot of folks. But other people are just so blinded to the truth. Other people are so committed to the Democrat narrative. Other people have so abdicated their responsibility to think for themselves, to analyze information, to even hear the side of the story that even somewhat presents Trump's position as at least reasonable to some degree. They've totally ignored all those possibilities, and they are all in with the Democrats' agenda. By the way, side note, I don't think I'll have time to discuss it, but perhaps I will talk about this in the inner circle. I don't know. There's an article out. It is in the stack of stuff, which of course you also get if you get the inner circle. But there is an article out in, I think it's Town Hall. I think I've looked at a lot of things here, and I'm not 100% sure, but it's in the stack of stuff. And in this article, it's basically saying there's a 5-alarm fire in the Democrat Party as we move toward these midterm elections, which would only cause the people at CNN to try even harder to deceive people into voting for Democrats here in the 2026 now midterm elections. So it's a mess, my friend. So, but as we talk here about Iran, what has Anderson Cooper told his viewers about? I have to tell you, I confess ignorance, but I have a sneaking suspicion that his viewers did not hear from him that there were tens of thousands of Iranians killed by their own government. I have a sneaking suspicion that he didn't tell his audience that people in the LGBTQIA plus community would be prosecuted, imprisoned, and yes, even face potentially capital punishment in the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure, not positive, but I'm pretty sure he didn't convey that message to his audience. I'm pretty sure his audience has been stirred up to hate Trump, actually I'm absolutely positive of this, been stirred up to hate Trump, been stirred up to hate Israel, has been stirred up to effectively, CNN has become, I watched, just from watching the first 5 minutes of this idiotic train wreck that I watched last night, just by watching that, it's obvious that they become the mouthpiece for the Iranian regime. You talk about Russian disinformation. What about Iranian disinformation? It looks to me like the Democrat Party, like Seth Moulton, who I talked about on yesterday's Todd, I think it was yesterday's Todd Talk, how the representative from, actually it may have been today's Todd Talk, how the representative from the People's Republic of Massachusetts said Iran's winning the war. It is wild stuff out there. You've got Democrats that are saying Iran's winning the war. You've got CNN anchors or pretend journalists out there like Anderson Cooper who are out there saying things that certainly make our president sound like the bad guy, misrepresenting what's going on. He had a guest on the program. I couldn't even stomach. I had to tune it off. I had other stuff to do, but he said she was coming up. She was a former JAG lawyer, judge advocate general, whatever, in the military. She was going to discuss how this was Trump's promise to attack bridges and power plants was potentially a war crime. We went through this yesterday. I told you that this is going to happen. You're going to hear about this. Meanwhile, what about the Iranians making IEDs and killing our soldiers? What do they talk about that? What about Iran using terrorist organizations to fight wars so that they can have some plausible deniability here and not actually put someone with a Iranian flag in an Iranian uniform out there to fight the battle? Instead, give it to some lunatic Islamo-fascist to go out there and do the job and have, again, some degree of separation to where they say, well, that wasn't us. We don't know what's going on there. How much of this nonsense has to happen? This is a state sponsor of terror chanting death to America, death. I've been through all this. Death to Israel. They promised to wipe Israel off the map if they get a nuclear weapon. With how intense this is, I'm starting to think that we know that we've damaged their capabilities but I don't think we're certain that they aren't capable. Again, what if they're able to put together a couple of these? I just think that it's possible. Iran is not willing to negotiate that. They're not even willing to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that this particular threat that Trump has levied against them, this may be the last warning. I mean, this is going to we're going to have to do something about this. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. And if you've read all the news out there, if you've sifted through the nonsense and the attacks on Trump and so forth, you'll get to some articles where you hear Trump talking about not ruling out sending in ground forces, not ruling out anything. In fact, he was asked at yesterday's press conference, which, by the way, was, of course, yesterday was Monday. It was at the White House. They were having the Easter egg hunt or whatever. Journalists were asking Trump about what was happening in Iran. Trump answers the question. Anderson Cooper gets upset about this because there's children there. In fact, he had some comments saying before he read, Trump's post on Truth Social, which I read yesterday on this program, by the way. I read his expletive-laced Truth Social post. I self-edited, my friends. Anderson Cooper did not. He went through the drama of saying, if you've got little ears in the room, you have to cover them. This is what the president of the United States now talks like. Which, fine. You don't have to like it. But let me ask you this. What is worse, using some expletives or threatening genocide? Using some four-letter curse words or threatening to nuke the biggest ally that we have in the region, an entire nation of people who, by the way, have been persecuted tremendously throughout the history of their existence. And by the way, may I add, miraculously still exist. Thank you to the mighty hand of God himself. Yahweh saw to it that the people of Israel were not wiped off the face of the planet. In fact, if you go back into history and you go back and you look at people groups that you read about in the Bible, the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Hittites, and all these people, and you were to say which of these groups is most likely, if you were at, in the times of the Bible when it was written, which of these groups is most likely to be around in the year 2026? First of all, they would say, when is that? And they would say, well, the calendar changed when the Messiah was born. Anyway, but once they established what that meant on the timeline, people would not have picked the Israeli people because that was, at least early on, remember this started with one guy, Father Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. They were enslaved in Egypt. I mean, the story goes on and on. It's remarkable that they're in existence. It's remarkable that they still maintained their identity. And by the way, I would argue that is one of the bits of evidence that this people was called and used by God Almighty. But that's another topic for another day. But as I look at this, and I see people are so upset about the rhetoric, but they're not upset about death to Israel, death to the United States, calling them the little Satan, calling us the great Satan, threatening to again nuke a nation. What on earth is wrong with these people? It actually reminds me of a story in the Bible. If you go back into the book of Exodus, again, the story of the Hebrew people. We mentioned Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had sons. One of those sons was Joseph. The brothers were jealous of Joseph because he was the father's favorite. And so they were going to leave him for dead. They were going to kill him and, leave him. But they decided, after Reuben, one of the 12 brothers, said, let's not kill him, let's sell him instead. And they did that. And Joseph ends up being sold. He gets taken to Egypt. He's put into slavery. I'm not going to go through his whole life. It's one of the best stories, I think, in Scripture. But the story ends up with Joseph basically becoming the prime minister or the second in command of Egypt. And God spoke to Joseph. And God did wonderful things through Joseph. In fact, he told Joseph that there was a time of famine that was coming to the region. And so Joseph built barns and silos or whatever it was at the time to store the crops. So there was going to be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And because God told Joseph what was coming, the people were prepared. No other group in the area had food, but they were all going to Egypt. All these foreign countries were going to Egypt because of Joseph, because of God, but because of God through Joseph, they ended up going to Egypt. That's how Joseph's family, the ones who sold him into slavery and thought he was over and, gone and, just they done away with completely. They had no idea that they were walking back into his presence. Joseph opened his arms and welcomed them. His family moved down there. Long story short, eventually, generations later, a new Pharaoh saw those people, the Hebrew people, the Israelites, as a threat because there were so many of them that he put them into slavery. And then the Pharaoh said, I'm so worried about these Hebrews uprising and overthrowing us. I want you, midwives, when there's a boy born, when you're there to delivery and a boy is born, you are to kill that baby boy. And the midwives wouldn't do it, to their credit. And here's the point. When they were asked about this, why are you not killing the boys? They made up a lie. They said these Hebrew women are they're so healthy and strong, and they have fast labors, and they're having their babies before we can even get there. This wasn't true. Getting upset at Trump's post using expletives, while the other side of this argument is threatening nuclear holocaust and genocide of an entire people group, is like being upset at these women who lied to Pharaoh about why they didn't kill the Hebrew baby boys, instead of being upset that the lunatic, maniacal madman was trying to kill them to begin with. I tell you, my friends, it's a lot to deal with here. But let's face it, living with discomfort is tough, and while prescription medications can help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options like kratom. No synthetics, no chemicals, no surprises. That's what you'll get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals, just natural kratom that's been used for generations. Start with their kratom starter pack. Use code ToddHuff to save 10%. Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, my friends. Quick time out. Back in just a minute. I mentioned earlier in the program, there's a term called weaponized ignorance. Weaponized ignorance. That's what Anderson Cooper on AC 360, which again I think is perfectly named with all the circles that they're spinning around over there, not making sense at all about anything. But he's weaponizing his ignorance. The left constantly does this. I've been thinking a little about this lately. The left acts so intelligent, right? They act so smart. They act like you're the idiot if you don't understand why it is that you should vote Democrat or why one of their idiotic policies is going to work. They act like you're the problem, my friends. And if you ask them to explain themselves, at some point, the vast majority of them they won't be able to. And they'll resort to name calling or making it about politics, the politics of personality, talking about Trump and how he's all these bad things, right? This is what they do. They can't defend their ideas because their ideas are not built upon truth. They're built upon sinking sand. And so they want you to think that they're really smart. This is where all the elites go. But see, the dirty little secret is, and it's not a secret if you listen to this program, but the dirty little secret out there in academia, out there in the political discourse, is that these clowns are not nearly as intelligent as they want you to think they are. They desire, listen to me, this is the truth. This is the bedrock principle. They personally desire a political party, a worldview that allows them allows them to do one of a couple of things. One thing might be it allows them to take from one group, take from a minority group, a minority of people who are in certain wealth classes, take their money to fund the things that they personally want. That's one thing that's appealing to these folks. They don't want to work for it. They want, again, they'll come up with excuses. They'll blame the wealthy for keeping them down, for abusing them, whatever the case may be. And so the only just thing is to take their money and let the people who have been downtrodden and picked upon and forced down into the gutters of society to be able to have funding to do the things they want to do. That's one of the reasons. The other thing is, and this should not be overlooked, the radical left has a morally bankrupt worldview. It is based on something that is anti-God. The radical left worldview is antithetical to truth. It really is. And if it's antithetical to truth, it's antithetical to the one who makes truth. It ultimately, at its core, is a group of people that want to be God of their own lives. They want to be God of their own lives. They don't want to accept that there is a moral law, because that means, and they know it, that means that there must be a moral lawgiver and that they would be accountable to this moral lawgiver. They don't like that concept. They hate that concept. They want to turn anything on its head that even suggests that that's remotely close to reality. That's how these folks are. I'm telling you, as Rush used to say, I know these people like every square inch of my glorious naked body. That's what Rush said. I'm not going to go that far. I'm just reminded of that as I think about Rush and how well he articulated and explained things and put a little humor in there as well. But these folks desire a world that is devoid of a creator. I'm telling you, this is at the core of a lot of this. And so there's almost this unwritten code that says, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with, say, another person on the left. That's why they're able to pull these groups that have nothing in common together. They're able to pull people who are, extreme union type. Again, my dad was a union member, but there's normal union members, but there's extreme union members. You've got these socialist type union members, and then you've got the LGBTQIA plus community. You got the trans community. You've got the extreme environmental wacko community. You got the community there are fringe groups, but it's almost like an unspoken agreement that they have with one another. We'll support you and your particular, desires for what truth should be, if that's even how they look at it, as long as you support us, right? We'll go along with socialism if you are okay with us saying that we should be able to marry people who are of the same gender, or that, we'll go along with all guns are evil if you say to us that it's perfectly natural and normal for someone, especially a child, to want to change his or her gender. And by doing that, magically, they suddenly become a boy if they're a girl, or a girl if they're a boy, or whatever. That's what happens. I'm telling you, this is deranged. And by the way, this is in the stack of stuff too. I probably won't have time to get to this, but it is there. And it's worth noting here, since I just said that, there's an article in the stack, which again, you can get as a member of the inner circle. Just text truth to 317-785-1030. If you do that, you'll get this every day about 5 o'clock. Although yesterday it went out at 6. Had to talk to the team about that. Anyway, so there's an article in there that says, where is this thing? Did I close that by chance? Basically, there's a study that's been done. A study that's been done that says people who change their gender have many more, what we all knew, what all objective people knew, they have many more problems and consequences than we're being told that they have. That's out there. Science has spoken on that as well. Again, I won't have time to get into that. But the left wants to misrepresent Trump. They want to lie about what this war is about. Anderson Cooper's smart enough to understand that what Trump is trying to do is win this war. And in order to win a war, what's really going on here is that Iran is squirming. They're getting backed into a corner. We've hit them militarily. We've taken out their leadership. There's all sorts of things that have gone wrong for the Islamic Republic of Iran. We've decimated their navy. We've decimated their air force, their ballistic missiles. Their defenses are not what they were. Yes, they did shoot down 2 of our aircraft, but they were not able. We made a mission deep into their territory to save our pilot. They weren't able to get there first, my friends. And that's not to mention how many thousands of sorties have been flown over the Islamic Republic of Iran. They've hit two of these aircraft. One was down. The other one actually was returning to a base, but the pilot decided he couldn't safely land. But regardless, the options for Iran are being taken away, and they're being backed into a corner. And this administration is the first administration since the Islamic Revolution back in 1979. You could argue that Reagan tried to, right? That was early on. He was the first president to have his full administration with the Islamic Republic of Iran on the world stage. He's had, of course, some problems with them as well. But if you look at this, most of the presidents, many of these administrations have kicked the can down the road. They didn't address these problems the right way. Iran is, of course, a theocracy. This radical theocracy, it does not fit in with this concept of representative republic, concept of democratic, anything that's even remotely close to democratic anything, where the people have any say whatsoever. It doesn't work. And so they're wanting to take away everybody's freedom. Again, they want to have a regional caliphate, ultimately a worldwide caliphate, to tell people if you don't follow our interpretation of Islam, you're going to, you're a target. You're a target. You're going to either pay taxes, you're going to be targeted, potentially executed, imprisoned, whatever. It's not a real pleasant way to live, my friends. This is incompatible with Western philosophy. It's incompatible with truth. And so here we are at this impasse, and Trump is simply backing them into the corner, taking away their options, not falling for their nonsense, not falling for their delay games and tactics and so forth. Trump says, listen, this war is going to come to an end. You're going to not have a nuclear weapon. And if you don't come to an agreement here tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, it's going to be a day of hell, Trump says. Got to take a time out. Folks, ever notice how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That's not by accident. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies like private equity, private credit, option strategies, all coupled with expert legal guidance. It's about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today and in the future. If you're looking to do more than just manage your money, if you want to leave a mark and build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Time out, my friends. Back in a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment. We're talking here today about how intentionally, I guess I would say ignorant or stupid. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not. I don't know what else to say. It's weaponized ignorance here on Anderson Cooper, 360 on CNN. And we're talking about this. And that's why people listen. There's a whole laundry list of reasons as to why people don't see what's going on here. I think it's pretty clear what's going on. And by the way, the reason it's so intense now is because this problem in Iran was not dealt with for the past 50 years or whatever. That's the takeaway here. That's the takeaway. In fact, I wrote a piece yesterday, not knowing I was going to get into this today, in the Inner Circle where we talked about this. We talked about, I know how seems like this is not presidential speak. And it's not. I'm not saying that it is. But is it not possible that we have been hoodwinked, that we have been fooled by the Iranians, by the mullahs, the ayatollahs, into playing a game, and it was a game to them, that brought them dangerously close to having nuclear weapons? Is it possible that maybe the thing that people at CNN on Anderson Cooper 360, the things that they want Trump to say are the very things that allow this mess to happen and continue into, decades now? I think that it's undeniably true that that's the case, my friends. I got some closing thoughts on that. By the way, if you want to subscribe to that Inner Circle newsletter, just text TRUTH to 317-785-1030. Okay. Think about this for just a moment. Your investments are like seeds. You plant, they grow, they multiply, but are they bearing the kind of fruit that you want? At 4-8 Financial, they believe your money should reflect your values. They specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing, screening out companies that do not align with your faith. It's all a part, I should say, of their purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of meaning and purpose. If you want to see right now how your investments align with your values, all you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment. You can do that by visiting 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, they're here to help worry about your money, my friend, so you don't have to. Okay, so I think without a doubt, this illustrates the problem. What I saw at CNN. They are the problem. They've been misleading people. They're not giving Trump's position on these issues even the slightest bit of credence. They're simply attacking them. They're telling their viewers that Trump wants to take out, basically target the people of Iran. Nothing could be further from the truth. If they understood, if they really grasped how close we were to a nuclear Iran, and if they really stepped out of their utopia for just 5 seconds, these idiots. Listen, you can have different political opinions. I understand that, but let us at least deal with the proper explanation of what's going on. And saying that Trump wants to simply target the civilians and that Trump is focused on war crimes, that's simply not the case. What Trump is focused on is winning this war. And by winning this war, that means on the other side of it, there will not be a nuclear Iran. If there is a nuclear Iran, the world gets infinitely more dangerous immediately. And then at that point, we've got to ask ourselves a whole lot more difficult questions. We have the same situation we have now, except now we have an enemy who's going to have a nuclear weapon or multiple nuclear weapons. As I mentioned, there's a good editorial that's in the stack of stuff today that I'm sending out in today's Inner Circle. But this problem is so much bigger than what these clowns like Anderson Cooper are out there saying it is. And why? Do they not care? I don't know. I know that they're so committed. They're so committed and they're so sold out to winning elections and to having their worldview be the predominant worldview that's pushed by a political party. They're so committed to that, they are blinded. They don't care about these risks. They see Trump, or they at least want to see Trump, as the major threat. Trump is not the threat. Trump is actually the one that's trying to prevent the greatest threat from happening, which is, in fact, a nuclear Iran. So Trump's given deadlines, 8 p.m. tonight. The Iranians better make a deal or there's hell to pay. The Iranian leaders seem to think that Trump is serious about this. And by the way, I don't know exactly. I don't know if Trump is going to strike. I do know that Trump is not going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. And I do know that whatever it takes to prevent that, it is on the table for Trump. And you know what, my friends? You can say whatever you want to say, but that's exactly what has to be in the minds of the people making these decisions. You cannot allow, I can't believe I'm uttering these words. I was old enough to remember 9/11, and I was old enough to remember how this country united against Islamo-fascists, regardless of politics, my friends. For the first, 6 months or a year, there was a lot of unity in this country. We had a common enemy. We have a common enemy today as well. They cannot be allowed to have this weapon. I've got to go. Out of time, my friends. SDG.